In 2006, an army of police officers surrounded the Banco Rio in Argentina and negotiated for hours with a bold group of robbers inside. The criminals took hostages and demanded the police bring them pizza. Finally, one robber told the police they were ready to surrender. But when law enforcement entered the bank, there wasn't a perpetrator to be found. They'd vanished without a trace, taking with them a reported $20 million in cash and valuables from safety deposit boxes. In 2006, the largest bank heist took place in Argentina in a smart and complicated way, carried out by 4 people. First was the leader. His name is Fernando Araujo. The second was the operations engineer. His name is Sebastian Bolster. The third was Beto de Lator, the financier. And the last one was Louis Salanes, whom we are going to call the Violent. There were 2 other people who helped them, but their identities weren't revealed. The story began when the operation leader, Fernando, visited his psychiatrist and revealed his desire to rob a bank. The psychiatrist was surprised. He assumed Fernando was under the influence of cannabis since Fernando was a cannabis addict. The psychiatrist asked, "Where did you get this idea from? Do you need help?" Fernando replied, "As you know, I am an artist, and I feel I can make a masterpiece out of the robbery." The psychiatrist asked again, "And how do you intend to execute this operation?" Fernando replied, "I have no idea so far, but I have been pondering this so much lately." The psychiatrist was dismissive of Fernando's speech, but the latter was intent on robbing a bank, which was going to be the largest and smartest heist in Argentina's history. Fernando used to walk daily around the streets of Buenos Aires, the Argentine capital, trying to discover possible targets for his operation. He found Banco Rio, a branch of one of the well-known banks in a wealthy area, meaning that most of its clients were rich and deposited their valuable items in that bank. Fernando put forth several different strategies for carrying out his operation, mulled them over, and ultimately came up with 2 options. First, they could enter the bank armed while it was open, take the money, and then quickly flee before the police showed up. The drawback of this strategy was that it was unsafe, and the loot would be modest because they wouldn't have enough time to collect all the cash and flee before the police arrived. The second method involved breaking into the bank while it was closed through a tunnel that led directly to the vault. However, because of the bank's sensors and advanced alert system, they would soon be exposed. And this method was also risky. Both methods carried similar levels of risk. So Fernando decided to go for the method that could grant him the bigger loot, meaning he was going to dig a tunnel through which he could directly enter the vault while the bank was closed. Fernando then began to consider how he could accomplish this. At first, Fernando thought about renting a ground-floor apartment or a studio near the bank and digging an underground tunnel to the vault. In the end, he discovered something that would simplify the task. On one of his routine city tours, he noticed the sewer openings along the bank's street. There was one opening every 10 meters, indicating that the sewer tunnel already existed beneath the bank. Fernando kept tracking the openings along the street until he reached the sewer estuary. This estuary was a large opening located only 150 meters away from the bank. Fernando entered the tunnel and began to explore the place. The tunnel was square at first, but after about 100 meters, he reached a circular tunnel, which was about 6 meters in diameter, a huge tunnel extending under the city and passing directly in front of the bank. Fernando realized he needed assistance at that point because it would have been nearly impossible for him to complete the operation alone. The first person who came to mind was Sebastian Bolster, one of his friends known as the engineer because of his expertise in electronics and mechanics. Sebastian was surprised when Fernando approached him and told him about his plan, because Sebastian only knew Fernando as an artist and a cannabis enthusiast with a spotless criminal record and no prior robbery experience. Fernando started providing Sebastian with the operations details. He told him about what he intended to do, the bank, the tunnel, and everything else. The engineer, Sebastian, expressed his willingness to help the leader, Fernando, in carrying out this operation. The first thing they did was go to the bank's location and then to the tunnel to begin planning where they could start digging. Fernando brought measuring tapes and dropped them into the openings. These tapes would help them determine their exact location inside the tunnel, and how far they were from the surface. Then they went to the bank and took several covert photos while posing as clients, to gain access to the vault, which was located on the underground floor, so they could estimate its surface area and the number of safe deposit boxes, which could be up to 100. They needed the bank's blueprints, which were most likely in the municipality, to obtain accurate numbers because all their calculations were estimates, along with financial assistance because the tools Sebastian made were expensive. Fernando felt he needed people with sufficient robbery experience. Fernando, the leader, started looking for a new partner to join the crew, so he reached out to a man they called the Doctor. This man's identity wasn't revealed. He was more of a coordinator than an accomplice. The Doctor assured Fernando that he would get the right people to help him with his operation. The first one was Beto Dilator, the financier. This man was a gangster with a criminal record, and despite his lack of experience in robberies, he was an expert in weapons. Fernando and the Doctor met Beto, the financier. They told him about the idea and presented him with all the details. Beto seemed excited. Fernando asked Beto, "Are you able to finance this operation? We may need a lot of equipment." Beto replied, "Actually, I am out of cash now, but I have a truck. I can sell it and finance the operation." Then Beto became the third main member of the gang. As for the Doctor, he wasn't a member. He was just a coordinator who helped the gang. Fernando needed a fourth member to help with the work that required strength. The engineer was busy making tools, and the financier was the eldest, so he couldn't help. The Doctor suggested the fourth person, whose name was Luis Alanes, nicknamed the Violent. He had a criminal record with enough experience in robberies, having executed many operations for which he was imprisoned for 15 years. Luis was hot-blooded and always ready to resort to violence at any moment. But he was intelligent and skilled in acting and fraud, and he would play an important role in the operation. Now the gang was complete. Fernando the leader, Sebastian the engineer, Beto the financier, and Luis the Violent. They began to study the details of the operation and went down together to the tunnel to check the calculations made by Fernando and Sebastian. As previously mentioned, more precise calculations were required, and for that, they needed the bank building's blueprints. The Violent promised to get them the blueprints, and when they questioned how he would do it, he responded, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." A few days later, they received the blueprints, and they still don't know how he got them. Did he bribe an employee in the municipality? Or did he break into the municipal building himself and steal them? No one knows. But what mattered most was that they had them, according to their plan. The tunnel should be dug diagonally, so they started by figuring out the starting point for digging, the length of the tunnel, the angles, and everything else to make their calculations more accurate. Then they created a thorough plan that included all the calculations required for the digging process. Next, they started bringing the necessary tools. They brought a diesel-powered generator and digging drills and started digging the tunnel. During the digging, there was always someone in the street to ensure that the digging sound was not heard from above. The digging process would take them at least several months, so they moved on to the next problem, which was the sensors and the alert system that turned on as soon as someone stepped inside the vault. Fernando, the leader, took advantage of his artistic side and began designing a sketch of suits that would lower their heat so as not to be detected by the sensor suits made of sleeping bags used by campers and hikers. He first bought a thermal camera, on which he made several tests to see if it would detect his body heat. This idea seemed a bit scary. They were going to be for people in the vault carrying a lot of equipment, in addition to the fact that they had to stay inside for a long period to get all the loot, so they would surely be detected. Overall, the idea wasn't safe at all and was highly risky. Fernando, the leader, was upset. He spent hours thinking about a way to get inside the vault without being detected. One day, an ingenious idea came to his mind. Fernando and his crew were planning to break into the bank through the tunnel while it was closed, and they had ruled out the idea of an armed robbery operation while the bank was open, because the bank would be swarmed with police in a few minutes. Fernando's new idea was to combine the two methods, the break-in through the tunnel and the armed robbery. Instead of using the tunnel for entry, they would use it for exit, making the sensors and alarms useless. The police would only surround the bank from the outside, and they wouldn't figure out that the robbers would use a tunnel to escape. First, Fernando did his research on the internet to see if someone had already executed a robbery in this way and found nothing, meaning that the Argentine police wouldn't expect it. Fernando informed the crew of his new plan, and they were amazed and excited. Now they had to add weapons to the equipment list, and the financier claimed that he would take care of the weapons as he was a gangster and had experience with such things. The weapons they used were special, more on that later. The whole process took them a year. During this year, the tunnel was dug, and a small dam was built inside the tunnel. Its purpose was to raise the water level to a certain point, as they intended to use small rubber boats to carry the loot. After that, they discussed how to escape. Initially, the idea was to escape toward the sewer estuary, considering the possibility that once the police realized what was happening, they would go to the estuary and block the road. The group started considering an alternate route that went in the opposite direction of the estuary, and found that it was preferable to the first route because it had numerous sewage openings, spaced every 10 meters along the tunnel. They chose one in particular that was 200 meters from the bank, and parked a van directly above the sewage opening. The van was customized. They made an opening on the van's floor that would be placed over the sewage opening. Beto, the financier, brought a small van and put it in his garage, and a crew gathered to make the modifications needed on the van. While they were working, Beto's wife came in suddenly, and they all asked Beto about the reason for his wife's presence in the garage. He immediately assured them that everything was fine, that he trusted her, and that there was nothing to worry about. Remember this woman, she will have a significant role in the story. After they finished the modification process on the van, they needed a driver who would wait for them in the van until they arrived. The driver was the second unrevealed person, nicknamed the Boy. Everything was almost ready. The only thing left was a method to quickly open the safe deposit boxes. There were hundreds of safe deposit boxes that couldn't be opened manually. It would take them hours. Sebastian, the engineer, made a hydraulic tool called the Cunning. This tool was designed to break the box's locks within only 7 seconds for each box. Finally, after all these preparations and efforts, everything was ready. The sewer tunnel was used for entry by boats, leading to the dug tunnel that reached the bank vault, which contained safe deposit boxes. About 200 meters away was the sewage opening from which they would escape, with the van parked above it. D-Day arrived on January 13, 2006. Sebastian, the engineer, was the only one who entered the tunnel. Next to the hole of the tunnel they dug, they placed rubber boats with the equipment. Then Sebastian climbed up the tunnel to the bank wall and waited for his friend's signal. The other 3 members of the crew, Fernando the leader, Beto the financier, and Luis the violent, met in front of the bank. When they were sure that everything was ready, they raided the bank with their weapons and immediately took the bank employees and clients as hostages, asking them to lie face down on the ground. The bank security guard was in his room. He locked himself in, informed the police, and it took the police a few minutes to show up. When the bank was surrounded by the police, Fernando felt it was time for a trick he had planned before, which he called the Coco plan. The idea was to take one of the hostages, go out of the bank, pretend like he wanted to escape, and then return to the bank. By this trick, he aimed to show the police that he intended to escape before their arrival. They had even placed a van in front of the bank as though they would use it to escape, but because of the quick arrival of the police, their plan failed. The Coco plan worked. When the police commander arrived, they told him there were thieves in the bank, who tried to escape through the front door and went back immediately. After realizing the bank was surrounded, the commander assumed the thieves had no alternative exit. The thieves took complete control over everything inside the bank except for one thing: the security guard who locked himself in his room. They had to get him out because he was in direct contact with the police, meaning that if he saw them leaving the bank, he would surely inform the police. They kept negotiating with him. Luis, the violent, told him that something worse would happen unless he came out of the room. The security guard remained stubborn and refused to come out, which prompted Louise to take one of the bankers, put a gun to her head, and threaten the guard. At first, the guard remained insistent, but when she started crying, begging him to do what they wanted, he couldn't risk her life and decided to go out. He unlocked the door, put his gun on a table, and surrendered. Louise, the violent, searched him completely, took his phone, accompanied him to the door, and let him out. The guard went to the police and the special forces that were surrounding the bank. The police commander asked him what was going on inside. The guard replied that there were 3 armed thieves with about 30 hostages. He also said they took their phones. The police commander glimpsed one of the thieves through the bank windows. He was waving at them, holding a phone, as if telling them to call the guard's phone. At the same time, Fernando, the leader, gave his order to Sebastian, who was waiting in the tunnel, to start raiding the vault. Sebastian began digging and heard the sound of something moving from the other side. It was Fernando, who was moving a filing cabinet that was exactly at the place where Sebastian was digging. Fernando was relieved when he saw Sebastian. He made sure he dug in the right place because until then, he was afraid they had dug in the wrong place. Sebastian, the engineer, entered the vault with his hydraulic tool, the cannon, and started opening the safe deposit boxes. The plan was to open as many as they could in 2 hours. They had estimated they could open about 400 boxes during that time. Fernando and Sebastian stayed in the vault, looting the boxes, while Luis and the financier took control of the hostages and tried to delay the police. Until the 2 hours were over, Luis, the violent, was responsible for communication with the police. He was the one who got the phone, and as mentioned before, that man had a talent for acting and fraud. So he managed to delay the police by creating different personas to distract them. Even the commander was surprised by the way Luis was talking to him. The commander asked Luis about their demands. Luis replied, "Look, we intended to rob the bank and leave immediately, but you guys were faster than we expected. We are not willing to harm anyone, but now we don't know what to do." The operations commander was looking at Luis through his binoculars from one of the bank's windows and saw him sitting on a chair, cross-legged. He seemed comfortable, as if he were taking a business call in his own office. The commander then realized he was talking to someone with previous criminal experience. Luis said, "Let me tell you something, my friend. It hasn't been a long time since I got out of jail. I spent 15 years, and this is not my first robbery. I know all your tricks. Please don't mess with me, you may hurt the hostages." The commander replied, "Don't worry, we won't do anything. Just release one of them each while to show us your good intention." Luis said again, "We gave you the guard. Don't be greedy. We are the only ones responsible for determining when to release the hostages. Goodbye." And then he hung up. This way, Luis proved to the commander that he was the negotiation leader and forced him to think twice before acting. And that's what the thieves needed, time. Luis and the commander kept in touch, and Luis, from time to time, made up stories to keep the police distracted. He told them to call his lawyer to negotiate surrender conditions, and gave them the phone number of one of the hostages. When the police called that number, Luis changed his voice tone and responded, posing as the lawyer, and told them he was on his way to negotiate. This man was a wonder. He was able to delay the police for as long as his friends needed. Unfortunately, when the 2 hours were over, Sebastian, the engineer, and Fernando, the leader, didn't manage to open the targeted number of safe deposit boxes. They had only been able to open 147 safe deposit boxes, and the hydraulic tool had some heating troubles. It didn't work as they expected, but still, the loot they got was huge, so they decided not to take more risks and stick to the plan. Fernando, the leader, called Luis, the violent, and told him it was time for the escape plan. At that moment, Luis resorted to his tricks again and called the commander, saying, "Look, we are done, and will surrender ourselves, but I know you are going to keep us in custody for a long time without eating. So before surrendering, we want pizza. Bring many pizzas for us and the hostages." The commander replied, "Okay, we will get you pizza for all of you." But Luis stipulated that it should be an original Italian pizza from a particular restaurant that was far away from the bank to delay them for as long as possible. The commander accepted their request and assured him they would get the pizza from the restaurant he wanted. Then Luis cut off all communication with the police. He and Beto ordered all the hostages to keep lying face down without any movement, and threatened that they would shoot if someone tried to move. At the same time, Fernando and Sebastian collected all the loot, put it in bags, and threw it through the tunnel. Luis and Beto joined the crew in the vault, and before leaving, they placed their weapons on a piece of cloth. The reason for this will be revealed later. As they came out of the hole, they placed something like a bomb in it, put the filing cabinet back in place, and got down immediately through the tunnel to their rubber boats. They put the loot on one and got on the other, then went along the sewer tunnel until they reached the hole from which they planned to escape. They carried the loot bags and climbed the ladder directly to the van without being noticed. They headed to the safe house they had prepared beforehand. When they arrived at the house, they put the van in the garage and immediately turned on the TV to see what was going on and whether the police were pursuing them. The funny thing is that until that moment, the police had not yet broken into the bank. They were watching TV, relaxed, as if they were watching a movie, waiting for the police's reaction when they realized what was happening. After bringing the pizzas, the commander tried to reach out to Luis, but all his attempts were pointless. Here, the police realized that the time for the raid had come. The police commander ordered the special forces to storm the bank and be prepared for any armed conflict. However, when the police raided the bank, they found no one but the hostages. The police didn't manage to understand what was going on or how the thieves escaped. They got confused because Fernando and his crew hid the hole. They even assumed the thieves were hidden among the hostages, so they took all of them into custody until their identities were confirmed. Eventually, after a period of searching, they discovered the hole behind the filing cabinet, but the problem was that they found something that looked like a bomb, so they were forced to call the explosives division to examine it, which in the end appeared to be a fake bomb. All of this was happening while the crew was in their safe house, watching TV and celebrating their achievement. Then everyone took their share of the loot randomly, which was like a small hill for them, so they couldn't calculate it. There was money, gold, and jewelry. The bank estimated the size of the loot to reach $19 million. This is why this operation was classified as the largest bank robbery in the history of Argentina. When the loot was shared, the plan was that everyone would go their own way and never see each other again. Each one took his share, got in his car, and went in a certain direction. They were happy, of course, but one of them would quickly lose his happiness and the others would be pursued one by one. It was Beto, the financier. As you know, his wife was aware of the robbery. One day, when Beto went back home, he noticed that one of the loot bags was out of place. He found it, opened it, and discovered that a big money bundle was missing. He went immediately to his wife and asked her, "Did you take some of the money?" She replied coldly, "Yeah. I took 5 or 6 small bundles." 5 or 6 bundles worth approximately $300,000. Beto told his wife, "We are trying to stay out of sight. How dare you take such a large amount of money without telling me? We will get exposed because of you." Beto demanded his wife return the money she had taken. After an argument, when she refused, the argument got heated. Beto ultimately decided to hide the loot bags he had inside the house somewhere else. He had no idea that his wife would be so angry with him that, as soon as he left the house, she went to the police station and reported him, fearing that he would cheat on her and take their money for his lover. Imagine that his arrest was brought about by jealousy. Beto, on the other hand, was devoted to his family and couldn't imagine leaving them. Eventually, Beto was arrested, and after questioning, he refused to reveal the identities of his accomplices. However, with the help of his wife and other evidence, such as phone tracking, the identities of the 4 members of the gang were revealed, and arrest warrants were issued for them. Although each of them went in a different direction in the end, they were all caught and tried. The odd thing is that not much of the loot was found because the thieves hid it in tricky locations. And wouldn't he admit it, they received prison terms ranging from 9 to 15 years. None of them managed to serve their full sentences. On the contrary, due to their good behavior, they were temporarily released after serving roughly 2 years in prison. Fernando and Sebastian were given 2 years of house arrest in their own homes. Beto and Luis, however, were incarcerated for longer periods due to their prior crimes. Both Luis and Beto spent much less time than the original sentence, 6 and 8 years, respectively. The sentence was light, and the weapons they employed were the main reason for this. Do you remember when I said their weapons were special and that they had placed them on a piece of cloth before running away? Their fake and unreal weapons were the reason. Imagine that they carried out such a massive operation, taking police officers and special forces hostage and controlling them with fake weapons. This is incredible. The obvious explanation for this is that, even if they were caught, the punishment would differ greatly from that for an armed robbery. Because of this, the sentences were brief, and they were also released early. The odd thing is that not much of the loot has been found, though we are unsure if a deal was made in secret, with the authorities to recover a sizable portion of the money in exchange for an early release. Or if bribes were paid, these are only assumptions. We have no idea what occurred behind the scenes. Customers of the bank receive compensation from the bank and insurance companies.